Okay, so now that we have created our style sheet, even though there's nothing in it, what we need to do is we need to be able to link it to our index file. So go to my index file, so I'm going to double click it to open it, and I'm going to go into the head area. This is the head, and I'm going to go ahead and link that file. So if I put my cursor right after title and I hit the return key, it'll automatically indent it for me. We're going to create a tag called link, and you see it wants to autocomplete for me. Okay, and the link is going to be something that's going to have an href attribute, and you see it autocompletes for me again. And the href, if you remember from our last time, it's a hyperreference, so it's going to give us an address to either go grab a file or go to a file or something, but it's a hyperreference to another file. So we're going to link with a hyperreference to, and then I'll put my beginning double quotes for my value, and the place that we want to link is to this style sheet. And if we look at the way that our structure is set up over here in the project on the left, you'll see that styles is in the same level of directory as index. So both of these files have a root level parent of the A2 basic CSS folder. That means that they're basically like in the same room. So because they're in the same room or the same folder, they could just call each other's names out. They don't have to go knocking on some other room that's inside of the house, right? So I could just go ahead and type the word styles, the file name styles.css right here, and it'll know to go grab that in the same folder that the current file, which is index.html, exists. So the other thing that we have to do, we have to have another attribute that tells it what the relationship is, and there's an attribute called rel. And that relationship is that it is a style sheet. That helps the browser know what to do with that. Whenever it goes and it reads it, it's going to treat it as a style sheet. And so I can come here now and end it. Link is a self-closing tag. That means that I don't have to have an end link tag like this. It's not going to end in that way. What I do for a self-closing tag is right before I end the last bracket for this opening link tag, is that I put a / right before it. And technically you don't have to have that / in HTML5, but it's a best practice. You can go ahead and put it there. And you'll notice that that's exactly what I did also with my image source. So if you do forget to type it though, it's not going to be a problem. So let's save this index file. All right, and I'm going to just open this file in a browser. We discussed it before that I could go up here and I say preview in Google Chrome or something like that, and that's one option. And what it'll do is it shows me my file and everything looks the same. Nothing is styled, but if I right click somewhere in the page and I say inspect element, what I can do is look at the inspector, the Google Chrome inspector, and if I open the head, you'll see that in fact it does show that that is a linked style sheet. And what's kind of cool is that I can right click on style.css here in the inspector and I can say open in a new tab, and you see it does actually go to a file called styles.css, and it's empty because we haven't typed anything, but at least you know that it's linked now. And so I'm just actually going to keep this open. In fact, let me just go ahead and do this. I'm going to keep this open, and that way I can just come back here and I can refresh the page whenever it's time. All right, so I'm going to go back here to my Komodo edit. All right, and what I want to do just to make sure that I can see what's really happening is I'm going to go into my styles, and you see here we can just jump back and forth between the two tabs. So I'm going to go to my style sheet, and I'm going to show you how to create like a really basic rule. All right, so the rule is the complete style definition. So let's do one for the body tag, and anytime in CSS you type something that doesn't start with a period or it doesn't start with a hashtag, if it's just the word, then what it's going to correspond with is an actual tag. So it's going to know to style the entire body, right? And if I wanted to do this, you know, to show you, it'd be the entire body of the HTML here. All right, so let's jump back over here and let's just say that we're going to give it a background color. The way that the styles work is that, and this is what's nice also about using a proper text editor like Komodo or code editor, is that it automatically, let's just start that over. Let's go to body, and then what you'll do is you'll type space, and then you'll put your first opening curly brace. The curly brace is, if you hold down the shift key, it's the one right above the open bracket above your quotation marks on your keyboard. And then because of the way that we have already set up our preferences in Komodo Edit, it automatically wants to complete that curly brace. So if I click the Enter key, it automatically tabs in for me so that it'll be a lot easier to see what it is that we're creating for our declaration blocks. So the rule is going to be everything starting with the actual, this is called the selector. Okay, so right now we've got the beginning of the entire rule with the selector, and then we have an opening curly brace, and then our declaration blocks go inside of the curly braces, and then our closing curly brace, and that complete set right there is called a CSS rule. So the selector literally will be able to select those HTML tags or classes or IDs. We haven't gotten to IDs and classes yet, but it'll select the body tag, every instance of the body tag. Of course, there's only one in our HTML, and it will style that body in the ways that we're about to define. Okay, so if I were to type something called background, you can see that it starts to give me some options, and there are all these different background options that you'll notice: background-origin, background-color, and so forth. We're just going to choose background, and I'm going to tell you right now that that is called shorthand. Now, if we were to choose something that said like background-image, that is an example of longhand. So what's kind of cool in CSS is that with shorthand, you can put all of those different longhand things into one declaration where this is the property, background is the property, okay, and then you put the colon, and then after the colon is where the value of the property comes, and that entire property and value is going to be called a declaration. If you want to go ahead and you start to put some color like green, for instance, you can put something simple there and then come back and then hold down your Command or Control key and then click on top of the color, and then it'll grab the color picker from the system. And then you can just go and select whatever color it is that you wanted. So let's just say that we want some sort of orange color. I don't know. Okay. All right, so now let's save that and let's just see what it looks like in the browser. Now I could do preview again, and that would be fine, but just so you know, we already have that open. So if I come over here and I hit this refresh button, you see that it automatically updates, which is pretty cool. Okay. Okay, so now that we have that done, let's take a look at actually doing something more intentional with our color. One of the things that I want to suggest to you is that you use some sort of color scheme editor. There's a good one. It's called Paleton. It's PALETTON.com. And it's a really terrific free website to use where you can figure out kind of the color scheme that you want to work with. And then it also will allow you to share a template, or, you know, pull out the HTML and then save stuff so that you can keep your color palette with you, which is really, really, really good for comps and, you know, for doing stuff in work groups. So what we're going to do is kind of fool around with this, and if I'm not going to go over everything that you can do in this, but you know, you can play with the different color models, and so in this example, this is like a well, this is a triad. This one's going to be adjacent color, which means that they're 3 colors adjacent to each other on the color wheel. We can go with a tetrad, which is 4 different colors that are sort of across from each other on the color wheel. And anyway, so there are lots of different ones that you can do freestyle. You can come up with your own. I'm going to recommend that, just so that, you know, you can work with something that is a tried and true color scheme, that you kind of try to stick with one of the typical ones, like a monochromatic or which could be kind of boring, potentially, or really good, you know, or adjacent color, or a triad or a tetrad. I'm going to stick with the tetrad, and I'm going to try to do something that's a little bit more saturated, and a little bit more vibrant. So, you know, maybe I could sort of come, you can see how I'm moving around the blue, and it's also adjusting its complement across its color wheel. And that, just so you know, a complement is a color that is directly opposite another color on a color wheel. So you can see that a tetrad is basically two colors adjacent to each other on the color wheel, as well as their complements. So if you kind of keep that relationship, then you're going to be sort of in safer shape. Now, you might not like the sort of the low saturation or whatever. So if you go over here to what says presets, you can see some variations on that choice that you've made, which is kind of nice. So like you could go with light pastels, or you know, you could do something that's like incredibly vibrant. Full color is probably going to be, you know, straight up the full hue. All right, so you can sort of muck around with that and go back and forth until you get sort of the thing that you want. And I might come in here and, you know, if I wanted to work with this under presets, if I wanted to look at bright pastel or something, that I could choose that and then come back over here and then start to adjust it so that I can see where I am in the color model, right? And so I might want to do something kind of like this. It's sort of like a sort of contemporary, almost mid-century modern kind of thing. Um, you know, it's up to you how you want to do this, okay? And you could go back and forth and kind of play around and make decisions. The other thing that's kind of cool that you can do is, like, maybe you look at this and you're having a hard time visualizing how some of these lighter colors that would work within that color palette could be seen. You could also look at examples. I'm not in love with these examples. This is artwork. If you wanted to look at page layout, this would be like a white layout, for instance, how those colors might go together. A dark layout, positive design, negative design, which is really nice to be able to do this. I mean, this is like, you know, an eye full of color. But then you can also look at how it might work with artwork, you know, so that you can get an idea of maybe some of the artwork that you might be using. And anyway, all right, so that's one option that you can do, is look at those kinds of examples. The other thing that is helpful is you can look at the table export, and then you can start to see colors in a really different way, which is really nice. And so, and it gives you all of the hexadecimal information. That's a hexadecimal color. It also gives you RGB values, and it gives you RGB percentages, which is really, really nice. And I'll show you kind of how you can use that. Now, the other thing is that we can go to look at the color list as HTML, and this is something that if you wanted, you could, like, you know, download this, but also it gives you a link to your color palette, which is awesome. You know, so you could, like, actually download a copy of this. You could go up to, you know, file and then save page as, and then you could save it either inside of your working folder, and you could, you know, leave this whole title on here if you wanted. Let's just do color palette. We'll just do that. Okay, and then I can just save it directly in here if you want. It's up to you. And then if you wanted to take a peek at how that looked, all right, I jumped here to the color palette, and then if I open it straight from here, you see that it actually did save it in my folder, so that it's no longer just on the web anymore, okay, which is pretty cool. And then, like I said before, you can always click on that if you want to go directly to that color scheme and you want to muck with it at all, because maybe you're not as happy with it as you thought you would be. And, the other thing too that you can do that I didn't really go is, if you go to export tables, you can also look at a different kind of export. So this is the color list. These are color swatches and also color combinations, which is really nice because you can see the contrast ratio, like for ADA acceptability and so forth. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can actually apply these colors.